Café Networking Podcast promotes successful business experts. I'm Tom Reaoch, known as the King of Networking, connecting people throughout the world from my podcast studio in Brazil. And today we talk with Faith Wood, conflict resolution specialist, joining us from Coldstream, British Columbia in Canada. Faith is CEO of Inspiring Minds Consulting, speaker, and author. So Faith, what is the value of storytelling?
You know, storytelling is like a gift we give other people. An image grabs people really quickly, but it doesn't necessarily hold their attention. And when we want to get somebody's attention, storytelling is what hooks us in. We've been telling stories for generations, millennia, and it's the thing that makes us lean forward. If somebody is telling a story that is captivating all of our senses, our hearts, our minds, our imagination, our creativity, it's that place where we let all the other things of the day go and we just allow ourselves to be transported. And I think storytelling in business is underrated. You know, a lot of us tend to speak like a monologue.
Right.
We throw information or content at people, but we miss the connection piece. And we have to start thinking in terms of how we create connection over content. And I think storytelling is the vehicle that does that beautifully. And it's such a great vehicle for getting people captivated.
I agree with you because many times the content, I think, is confused with just technical content.
Yeah.
But what I hear you saying, you got to put emotion into that. You got to make people want to listen and get to the end of the story.
Well, even if you think about, how you communicate at a dinner party, it's not like people sit at the dinner party and then start, so what did you do today? And we start hearing the story, or we find out where you came from and you start telling the story of how you got here.
Right.
And that's what gets people interested. And when you need to get somebody's attention, if you want to be influential, you need to have people's attention. And, influence just comes down to three moves. It's
Right.
attention, affiliation, and approach. So in other words, I need to have your attention. You need to have mine. Then we need to form a connection. Storytelling forms a connection. It is what we remember. A lot of people just don't remember how much memorization goes into the periodic table. But if we created a periodic table told through story, it would be a lot easier for us to recall it when we needed to write the test later.
Well, I agree with you there, because I can faintly remember why I even had to memorize that. But I do remember the stories about why some of those things on that were important.
Storytelling just makes information so sticky. And if you think about, telling a great story, that sticky factor, so that you are somebody that comes to mind because there is a trigger or a little key that starts and says, man, I heard that story once before. Or I heard, when I get up to speak on the stage and I'm doing a keynote to a large group, they don't remember the tips and the long list of, hey, here's your strategies for anger management. Here's what you need to know about conflict resolution. What they remember is the story I told about having to navigate that conflict and how it ended up, because the story was the memorable part.
Right.
The story is what makes it unique. And from a professional speaker's perspective, our stories are the only thing that really can't be stolen. They can't be copyrighted. They can't be plagiarized. We remember them intimately because they're our stories.
Right.
And we share them openly to form connection. And that connection allows us to feed people content. And, I think about times when I'm speaking for large government organizations or hospitals where they're very, very stressed. They're very overwhelmed.
Right.
They're broaching on burnout these days, especially in healthcare, where they've been a lot going on since the pandemic,
and still is, yeah,
and still is everywhere. So there's a lot of this tension and irritability that exists at a service level,
right.
And they'll sit and listen to a story. They don't want to be talked at. They don't want to be lectured. And neither do the rest of us. How many times we tune out on the news because they're giving us a lecture about how to drive our cars, or how to get to someplace on time, or how to do the right thing, or be kind. Or, I think that overall, we as human beings, we're tired and we want you to involve us. And storytelling creates that involvement, it invites you in. And I just think it's such a brilliant vehicle. I know when I first started writing fiction, people told me not to do it. They basically said, you're a professional speaker, don't write fiction. And I said, I was sitting in an airport for 3 days waiting on a flight that had been canceled over and over and over. And every time I picked up a self-help book, it was filled with homework. You read a chapter and these are the pieces you should have taken out. In other words, you're spoon feeding me, and I'm not allowed to use my own judgment, my own critical thinking, my own level of interpretation. And so I started to say, I'm going to write a book that I want to read when I'm tired, when I'm frustrated, when I just want to get lost in something.
Or find yourself, right? You want to get lost with,
And no homework. I don't want the homework.
Right.
And so I decided to marry up all the stuff I talk about on the stage in human behavior and my background in law enforcement. And I'm really interested in mysteries and solving crimes, always have been. And I started writing crime novels. And I thought, I don't know anything about fiction, but I do understand story. And if I could write
you do, because I'm sure you do, because as not only as a law enforcement person, half of the stories that we hear aren't true.
100% not true. Or
so we hear more fiction than truth.
So true. And there's so much of it that is being, designed to get us to look in a new direction.
Right.
It's like sleight of hand, And so I like sleight of hand in communication. Sometimes we are using sleight of hand or magic tricks in the way that we communicate with each other.
Well, that gets back to what you said about stickiness.
Yes, exactly.
We have to stick one way or the other. And sometimes, unfortunately, today out there in this world that we're talking about, more of the fake happens to stick more than the truth.
Well,
so.
And is that because the stories are better? Right?
Right, that's true.
Sometimes...
that's true. It's not fake, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what true is anymore.
It's so hard to know, and it's fake news. Okay. But isn't a lot of it, everyone's got an agenda. Everyone is trying to get something sold, a bill of goods sold. And, when we look at expert communicators, their goal is to sell a particular narrative. And so if they tell a really good story, it's sticky.
And that's what's happening, because the stickiness has really come. Fake news is actually news. And people seem to pay more attention to what's fake, because they really want to see how, so that's sort of like, just talking about your books. I mean, there's probably more drama in the fictional, right? So,
well, I've often said fiction allows you to tell a story without being sued.
Good point. Good point. Well,
so if somebody says, I think you're writing about me, and you're like, I don't know why you would see yourself in that character.
Well, Faith, I want to thank you. We're coming to the end of our time, but how can our listeners find you?
They can find me on one of two websites. One is imind.ca. So as in, I really do mind sometimes that we're fighting and disagreeing so disagreeably. And the other one would be at faithwood.ca. So if they want to see the books that I write, faithwood.ca. And if they want to check in with me and see what I do from a communication and conflict capacity, imind.ca.
Very good. Well, thanks again for being part.
Thank you very much for having me this morning.
And that's the truth. Take care.
Thank you.
So again, you can all find more information about Faith Wood. It's Faith, last name Woog, and her many books on www.imind.ca. www.imind.ca. You also find her on LinkedIn and TikTok. Café and Networking is brought to us by Focus MI Market Intelligence, an agricultural market research specialist in Brazil. More information at their site, focusmi.com. Thanks for listening until the next time here at Café and Networking Podcast.